Hello everyone, my name is Nathan. I'm here with my lovely wife and life partner, Charla. We are often asked to talk about marriage. I think that's probably because people think if we can make it, then anybody can make it. I should say for clarity that neither of us are professionally licensed marriage counselors. My wife is good at hiding bodies, so if that qualification is anything, then we'll go with that. In our regular life, she is a pharmacist and I am a pastor. I've also worked in construction and various business ventures. Because we're asked a lot for this kind of a thing, we decided to try, and we're going to take questions that have been asked us and we're going to address them. I don't know what her answer is going to be. That's not a trick. We intentionally studied separately. I do not know what she's going to say. Hopefully she will only say things that make me look good.
Really good, right? Yes.
Like for example, how do you get your husband to stop praying so much and spend more time with you? Because that's something I know has been very real.
Yeah, definitely.
So the first question is this: what is the hardest thing about being married? What's the hardest thing about the whole process, the day-to-day of it? So I'm going to let my wife go first and hopefully make snide comments while she talks.
Yeah, definitely will make snide comments while I talk, and vice versa. So to preface this, I want to say that we've been married for 27 years. So just in case there's anybody out there who's wondering why we have any credibility at all. We managed to make it that long. Hopefully we will continue to make it. We don't have any plans to quit anytime soon. So we're doing okay. I think for me, our early years were young and very tough. So it's harder to say, had we been in a normal, settled environment, what our early stresses would have been. So I'm going to move beyond that early stage where it was kind of just, living day by day and struggling somewhat. But for as looking at marriage as a whole and throughout the years, what has been the most difficult thing? For me, it would be to learn to communicate. Learning to communicate with your spouse on the same level that they're on is very, very hard. I did not know how to communicate at all coming into marriage. It pretty much was, I was very straightforward. There was no understanding someone else's feelings or talking about their feelings. There was no openness for me. You pretty much pretended things didn't exist. That was how I communicated. As he will.
Well, to be fair, that was kind of her formative experiences.
Right. Yeah. So, my parents, I'm sure, had discussions, but they didn't have them in front of us. And we were not allowed to ask a lot of questions. That was kind of that era that we grew up in. And it was probably Southern parents. You kids were seen and not heard. That had kind of like prevailed somewhat. So we were not allowed to ask a lot of questions about things. It was seen as being argumentative or stepping outside of who you were. And I remember as we got older, I would ask questions, and I remember the other kids would just look at me, stretch their eyes. But I was the baby, so I could get away with more. But I would ask my dad specifically questions. And my mom was not a very outspoken person. She was very much a submissive person. She followed behind my dad's rule until we were much older, and then we realized, oh hush. And then we realized that she was really not so much that way. She just was in her earlier years, because she was like the rest of us. In these early years, you're so busy raising kids and living life until I think she just did not dwell a lot on her own internal feelings. So when we got older and we all were married and out of the house, then we started seeing her personality come forward some, and it was kind of funny. We all laughed about it. We're like, all right, Mom. But so but I was never exposed to that when I was younger, so I did not really know how to communicate. And I think that has been, and it still is, one of the largest struggles for me at times, because I want to clam up.
How did you get started? I mean, so someone, they are in a relationship where they feel a difficulty there, where would you recommend for them to get started as an effort?
It depends on, honestly, where you are in your relationship. I think a lot of people have a hard time going backwards. If you're well ensconced into a relationship and realize there's been a breakdown in communication, it's very, very difficult to be, I think, honestly, real with yourself.
Yeah.
And to be honest about where the breakdown is. It's very easy to be very self-centered.
Right.
And I don't mean that selfish. I mean just you see your own perspective.
Yeah.
And you feel like they don't see your perspective and they don't understand where you are coming from. And it's probably a tremendous amount of both.
If you haven't communicated it, they don't.
No.
And you have to, a lot of times you've in a relationship, you've been kind of coping for a while.
Right.
And you have bad habits. You can taking it for the team, and you have this building resentment in you because you haven't spoken up. You haven't tried to communicate. You just in some way are dismissive. Well, this is what it means to be married. Well, maybe, but not necessarily. It might be a healthier relationship, if you would speak up and you would say, no, I feel like this. And that is if you are the one who is not communicating. On the other hand, if you're the one who can't get the other person to communicate, because it can be both sides. I would say you have to listen, and you have to intentionally listen, and you have to sit them down and say, because this, honestly, this is what she and I went through right here. What are you feeling? Why are you feeling this? And she would work through it and verbalize it, and then. We kind of progress from there.
I do want to say that I still struggle with the verbalizing part of it, because although I'm a very verbal person, I was not very verbal about feelings. I did not really understand my feelings. I never really took them out and looked at them and tried to put them in verbal terms. So I didn't really, I was not good at communicating those things. So I might be feeling a way, but I still was unsure about how I was feeling. So he was really, really good at just pulling it out of me and saying, okay, but what? So you're saying this. And I'd say, no, that's not what I mean. So you're saying that, no, that's not what I mean either. So we did a lot of this searching and trying to figure out, and he was the one that pulled it out of me. And I think a lot of times that role, that strong communication role, falls to one or the other partner. But then the reciprocal person, the person who's being quiet, the person who's struggling, who has a hard time articulating their feelings, they have to be willing to step into the conversation and not shut down, which is, I think, my tendency, and I think a lot of people's tendency, especially men. You feel like they're very verbal, they're on top of it, they can say exactly, they can articulate their feelings, and you're kind of left as okay, well, if that's what you think and that's all you think, and I apparently don't have a point and I apparently don't matter. So I think it's very important for the verbal person and the person who does communicate well to realize that you are dominating this sometimes because you have such good verbal skills. So there comes a time when you have to step back and say, okay, how do you feel?
One of the things that I've heard you say a lot is how you had to learn to speak precisely. Your feelings were too messy, and you had to actually slow yourself down and try to be. You understand what I'm saying? Talk a little bit about that.
Because I had not articulated my feelings before ever, to really be able to say how I was feeling. Sometimes I would literally have to sit and have a monologue within myself and make notes. How I felt, step one, this is how I feel. Why do I feel this way? And try to figure out my feelings. you didn't take out the trash this week, and I feel like you've forgotten like 3 times. Obviously, I'm making up something because
Oh no, that's real right there.
that is
It may
that's
not have
our
been the
son's-
trash, but it
that's
was
our son's
something.
job. That finding those little things that just stress you over and over and over. Why do I feel like I am always the one taking out the trash when it's obviously your job? You're not doing your job, and it's a tremendous frustration to me when I would go through and list why it was a frustration to me. Was it more simple for me to just be able to do it myself, or to know that that was his job and this is my job? And I found out a lot of times that my expectations were I was supposed to be doing certain things and he was supposed to be doing certain things. And if he was not doing his things, even if he had a legitimate reason not to do his things, it irritated me. Even if he was sick or he was out of town, if I had to take the trash out, it irritated me. And being able to
I did
able
not have
to
permission to be sick.
sitting down and figuring out that something was irritating me, actually realizing that it was irritating me, and occasionally it was irrational. But that played into how I then handled it with him in the future when it was legitimately his time to take it out and there was nothing wrong and he still didn't do it, I felt like. So it would play into that. All this frustration would build up and I'm like, okay, but why do I have this frustration? I couldn't tell you why I had the frustration. So I would have to sit down and write it out and think about what my frustration was. And I think that helped me a lot, because I had not done that before. Whereas I feel like you're a really strong communicator, but in a way, you're like combat communicator. He can handle conflict with
Word
anybody.
for the day is combat communicator.
He is so good
I'm
at
like calling in airstrikes.
listen.
Okay.
But let me talk about this. Okay, it's the person who internalizes so much mentally. They internalize every conversation they have with everybody and rehash it in their brain, and they read all kind of books on communication, and they literally go through things in their mind all the time. They're playing out scenarios, and what if this happened? How would I say this? That person is going to have a better gift of verbal communication than somebody like me, who kind of does not think overly much about life. I just go through and live it.
Well,
So that's the difference in our communication. He is very well prepared for it, and I was not. So he's actually taught me a lot of skills.
no, I knew if we talked, there would be things we agreed on.
He
Okay,
is.
so let's try to bring
See
this
what I
home
mean?
to wherever
See what I mean?
you are.
See what I mean?
I think I want to do some. I'm a pastor, so I'm most comfortable giving spiritual advice. So I want to encourage you to do this. If you feel like you are failing at communication in your marriage, or to be honest, in any very important relationship of your life, I want to encourage you to take that confession to prayer.
Yes.
Take that confession to prayer. Lord, I'm not doing a good job with this. And I'm going
Right.
to tell you why. Obviously, you're thinking the one thing, we're trying to be Christian and we pray. That it's more than that.
No.
There's also the fact that you don't know yourself.
Right.
I don't know myself. And it's very difficult to know one's self.
Right.
And prayer is God's way of, I believe, almost supercharging your understanding of yourself. It's as
Right.
though if you will pray, Lord, why am I dealing with this problem? If you will ask, if you will seek, if you will knock, I promise you, you will get insight. It'll come at the most surprising times, and God will spoke it to you. You'll wake up in the middle of the night and just know something. You'll see, because you planted that seed and it's growing within you. So that's number one. Number two is talk about it before it's a fight. If you wait until you're in a fight to talk about communication,
Right.
that's like planning to work on your car during your summer road trip. Your road trip's when you need the car to work. And when you fight, that's when you need your communication to work.
Right.
So don't gear shift in the middle of the fight. So let's say you're fighting over, not taking out the trash, since my wife has already outed me on her disappointments. Of
Actually,
my early
our son
years.
takes out the trash.
So that's what we're fighting over. If I am fighting over this, it's your day, no, it's your day, and not only that, but I can't stand the way you communicate. That's just not helpful. That's a gear
That's
shift.
the problem. You start adding to it.
Yeah, and it's if you want the wrong kind of momentum, that's how to get it. But if you will talk about your communication before you're having a fight, and so that's number 2. Here's number 3. A lot of times in a relationship, actually, one of the subjects I was going to talk about, which I think would be better for us to do it on our next episode. We're all
He's
official.
saying,
We
I'm
have
long-winded.
episodes.
So he's saying,
My
I
wife's
take too long.
always taken over.
I do
Y'all
take
pray
too
for
long.
her.
I'm sorry.
So the third thing is this: is a lot of times when you're failing in communication, the most common thing I've seen is when you have a marriage where one person's personality dominates the other person. I want you to know, just because one person is more boisterous or light, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not just a personality thing. I've seen some fanatically passive-aggressive people who they didn't say much, but Lord, nobody in their household could get by with anything unless you understand what I'm saying? So that's not what I'm talking about. But in the relationship, if there's one personality dominating another personality, there's a chance that it tends toward unhealthy domination, and that will express itself in resentment. Resentment is that warning light on your dash of your car, that it goes off and you know you have a problem coming. Right now, it's a maintenance problem, but if you don't get it fixed, it's going to become a mechanical problem. That's the way it is in our marriages.
Right.
You've got to talk about it. And if you don't know how to say it, it's okay. You just have to. Something that Charla and I tell each other a lot is that you can say almost anything if you say it the right way.
Right.
And so you have to find a way to take the accusation out of it, take the resentment out of it, and start with what you know is true, not what you feel is true, not what you theorize is true, but what you know is true. And if you will set that standard for yourself, you'll draw way back in. You won't say, you never give me time. You'll say, I feel like, you understand how you feel me softening what I know. I feel like that sometimes, this fact that you play golf every day of the week is a bit much, I think you get the idea of what I'm saying. So that's 3 things. Take it to prayer. That's always going to be number 1 for us.
Right.
Because just full disclosure, we're both so flawed that if we don't take it to prayer, we're going to be planning funerals. And it's going to be mine. Number 2 was, I forgot. You remember what number 2 was?
No.
So number 1 was to talk about it before you're in a fight about it. That was number 2, and then number 3, which I don't remember number 3 either.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But
the most important one was pray about it.
But be aware that if there's some resentment in your relationship, it's a warning sign, and you should talk before you load the guns.
Definitely. I wanted to add just one more thing on that. There are times when it's so difficult, at least for me, because I was struggling with being able to communicate and being tremendously frustrated. And someone gave me a little circular thing that came in a card when we got married. It's actually still on my refrigerator over there on the side. And what it says is, and I've told people this over the years, remember the strong love that grew between you when you first began, and hold that close to you in times of difficulty, is basically, I'm paraphrasing. But there have been moments when I've actually literally had to stop and think, okay, how did I feel about him when I first met him? Instead of thinking about the here and now, how resentful I am at the moment because I am unable to communicate what the frustration is, even though he's willing to listen, I just couldn't communicate it. Instead of focusing on my resentment at the moment and how angry I am at the moment, stopping and thinking about and really thinking about how I felt when we first met and how much I loved him, and being grateful.
She had it bad.
I did. Being grateful, being thankful, and literally, and that's how I would pray. I'd say, God, help me to remember that. Help me to remember how I really feel about this man I'm married to. Help me to remember that I really do love him, even though I don't feel like it at the moment.
Now we're getting closer to this.
Help me to remember that, and help me to remember that this is sacred, that this is important, that this is worth fighting for.
Yes.
This is not just a friend. This is my friend. This is my one friend who's going to be there forever for me, who is my best friend, and he is my best friend.
Yes.
This is the person. This is my person. And help me to remember that in those moments of extreme difficulty, you've got to stop and focus on those things. And don't just like, okay, yeah, he's that person, I love him, let's move on. No, really think about it. And when you pray, honestly pray. Honestly pray. And even if you are not a prayerful person, in that moment, stop and say, God, please help me to understand this situation. Open my understanding. You've got to pray specifically. Open my understanding. Help me to understand what is going on in our communication. What is wrong with it? Give me the words to say that would help us to communicate better, that would help us find that common path, that would help us move forward with this. Because I love my husband, God, and I believe that you gave him to me. And
he did.
I know too. The point is, you've got to be intentional about it. You can't just say, oh God, help me with this marriage, because I'm about to ready to kill this man. You've got to be intentional about A, how you really feel, and B, what you really want. I know it feels like I'm speaking to the women, but men too. I think if you're in that frustrating moment and you feel like you're not communicating, stop and take a minute. Even if you're not a prayerful person. Some of you are not prayerful, and it's okay. You're a church prayer and you say a few prayers through in the week, but you're not very intentional about your prayers. Stop in that moment and realize there is a God who cares about you. There is a God who cares about your marriage, and he does care about your circumstances. You are his child, even if you don't always do everything right, even if you're not necessarily living right. Take those moments and do the thing that is right, and talk to the person, the only person, the only one who is able to help you with your mental processes and making you say things right and making you think right about things and exposing weaknesses in you that you may not see in yourself.
All right, two things.
He loves lists. Number one. Number two.
Two things. Number one, if you're watching this with your spouse, you can right now take a kiss break and lean over and give them a little kiss. Like, number two, if you're in the Charlotte area and you don't have a church you're worshiping at or with, we'd love to host you and get to know you. First Church Charlotte, right on the east side of the city, 4929 North Sharon Amity. God bless you. We love you. Have a great week.